Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Matthew's Coffee Bar. I'm back again with my crew, and boy, are they ready to roll. So I want to welcome every one of you from wherever you're watching us, both on YouTube and Facebook. We are all live on our website, www.dcdonholm.org. We are live on our Twitter handle. So you can go ahead and just join us, and it's going to be wonderful as we engage in some very constructive conversation. We try to figure out which way Kenya, and especially from the church's perspective. Of course, on board tonight, I've got my usual crew, yours truly, guitar all the way from the UK, a city called Oxford, amazing city, by the way. And then, of course, I was yours truly, the one and only man from another UK, in the person of Ken Odwori, all the way from United Kisumu. Welcome aboard, Ken. Great to have you here. And then, of course, the man that is coming from two UKs, from United Kisumu and United Kingdom. Yours truly, Jacob, in the house. Yourself, Dima, Karibu Sana. And then, of course, the one and only lady in the house tonight who started a storm last Wednesday. Guys, Joy is back, and she's back big and good, ready to roll. Welcome on board, Joy. It's great to have you here, by the way. Okay, guys, Karibuni Sana. Here's when you get to start a watch party. You gotta share, invite your friends to join in, because we really want to have a conversation that is going to kind of just give us direction. We're asking ourselves which way this nation, which way Kenya, and especially from the church's perspective. For too long, we have been sleeping for too long. We have just been on our knees. Now, if you know, we gotta wake up on our, wake up and get ready to get involved in the arena of politics and leadership, so that we can hopefully give direction to this country. All right. So that's our conversation today. You're welcome to comment. You're welcome to ask your questions, and it's gonna be wonderful. All right. So, guys, let's dig in. Last Wednesday, there was a serious conversation between one guitar, and I can see my brother Rich is just logging in absolutely on time. He's a man of conspiracy theories. And the question, of course, was, I think it was huge in your heart. I mean, the issue of what sort of leadership do we choose? Is it based on character, based on integrity, or do we just get someone out there? And of course, that was where we were at. I don't know whether you guys have been able to call a truce or something, where you are standing in your submissions as far as that conversation is concerned. We still hold to the view that if you're going to be in a leadership position, hey, we need some integrity, we need some character. We need to have a person that draws respect, especially in in the Department of Integrity. So, open us up, Tikitao, by your conviction right there.
That is absolutely right. I think, as we said last week, character trumps. I stand by that position. Obviously, Joy, who's also our lines cross in more than one area. We can agree to disagree, and I actually enjoy having robust conversations with Joy. Last time I was in Nairobi, we were having robust conversations as to how to hand over ministries, as it were. So my position still remains the same. I think the question I was asked is about David. So why did David still retain leadership? And I think when you look at the record, is after his fall, he lost a lot of standing. So there were a number of things that he was excluded from because of that moral fall. So for me, character still trumps. I agree with Joy and Richard in terms of skill. So there was a comment made last week that, you can have a doctor who's got character but no skill. And I would counter that by saying, by the very fact that that doctor has got character, he wouldn't call himself a doctor if he has no skill. So for me, character trumps. And character is what takes you through the bad times. So if I want to bring it to people that I respect, so if you talk of people who are vying for leadership positions in globally, or even if you look at, I have had conversations with people who headhunt for people in senior positions. They take skill as accepted, but what they are interested in is listening to people's life stories, what they have gone through, and how they've managed to deal with difficulty, how they've managed to deal with challenges, and because what they're looking for is character in that person. What type of character is this guy? If we're going to employ him, how is he going to deal with issues? So I've got respect for, for instance, whether we call him Baba or whoever, if you look at his story, he's gone through a lot in his life. He's lost. I don't know why we tend to demonize him. His wife is a Christian, so why don't we see him in that sense? He feels a lot of, he occupies the same position as a lot of other, I know Jao is ready to go, occupies a lot of positions where other politicians who have got Christian spouses. The other example is David Cameron. I've got a lot of respect for him. He's gone through.
Okay, we are losing you, Gitao.
It's a network, isn't it?
Yeah.
No bundles.
Your network sort of, you kind of just got stuck somewhere.
Yeah, you David Cameron, why?
Joy said buy bundles, no bundles.
I don't know, because I had the same problem last week as well. It was just keep on and off. So for me, the issue is character. And sometimes when you listen to people's stories, what they've gone through, that shapes them. And that shapes them mightily. I'll finish with one thing that I was told when I came to the UK, and I was under the tutelage of one Stephen Thomas, whom a lot of you know, who is the senior leader of Salt and Light Ministries. And the one thing that I learned from that man, he said, you never compromise on your principles. You never, ever compromise on your principles. Keep those ones clear. Don't, as soon as somebody is taking you into a territory, compromise on your principles. That one you disagree with. There are other things you can compromise on, but your principles, you have to keep them clear and you don't compromise on them. And I think that's why I'm placing a huge, huge premium on character in a leader, because those are your principles, that you won't compromise on them when the going is easy or when it's really hard going. Thank you.
All right. Well, there it goes. To stuck on your. Well, I guess what I'm hearing from you, Guitar, is that there has to be a balance between skill and, of course, character as well. I don't know whether just still hold on to our position, and I would like to give her an opportunity. This is just a warm-up because there are two items that I want Joy to really enlighten us, but I would like to hear her response as we get this show on the road. I'm trying to get Michael coming in because he seems to be having a different ideas. So, Joy, what's your take?
Different ideas in Natasha Osman. You know those ones of you wonder, is it a hacker?
Yes. No, it's him. What happened? I seem to have sent my personal ID on email and then a different meeting ID on the phone. If you realize, you've actually two links, and I know that's probably his challenge. So I'm trying to sort him out quickly. Go on, Joy.
For me, it's quite simple, really. It depends on where you're looking for a leader. So, for example, if you're looking for a leader in the corporate world, Guitar correctly said, these days, papers only account for 20-30% of what they're looking at. Apart from when I've been looking for work in the government, most of my other jobs that I've done in the last 10 years, I haven't had to present my my documentation at all. People look at your notoriety amongst your colleagues. They stalk you online and look at the work that you have done, and they have a one-on-one with you, and you have a meeting of the minds. So, but when I have applied for government positions is where I've had to hunt even for my primary school certificate, something that I find it's just tiring, because the degree is in my head or it's in a paper. I've never understood, but such is the government. But when you're looking for a political leader, it's a different yardstick altogether. And the reason for that is fairly simple. It's because politics is the kind of profession where you need to have a certain amount of genteel, yes, but you also need to have a certain ruthlessness. Otherwise, you're not going to succeed in what you're trying to do. Not only the ruthlessness, you also need to have a certain level of cunning. There's some things, like you said about Steve Thomas. He says, never compromise on your ideals. Even as I'm very active in politics, there are some spaces where if I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, you guys, I'm interested in doing that. They'll even tell me, they're like, Joy, the things you need to do when you're in that office, you want to do. So, achana na hiyo, sisi majambazi tupambane nayo, you kaa kwa lini yako. There are some spaces where a certain caliber of righteousness, you'll have to compromise on something. And that's why when I look at political leaders, kings, whatnot, when you look at them, they of necessity have to be people who are able to operate in both spheres of light and darkness for some. And I don't know why this is so, but there is no leader in that level you find is straight as an arrow. Part of the reason is also because there's some things that you will need to do for your people of necessity. So for example, your country needs to go to war. The neighboring country has irritated you and you need to go to war. You know women and children are going to get killed and you have to give the order. Are you going to stay there and say no blood is going to be spilled on our behalf because you know what God hates? You have to have that level of ruthlessness that I think we see in most leaders around the world. But now coming to what the trigger, there's something else that the children of the world are very good at doing that we as Christians don't do very well. They learn how to leverage to advance their interests. So if you look at the big pharma, they know how pharmaceuticals, they know how to lobby, they know how to wheel and deal, how to make donations to make sure that they get what they need. Same with the gay people, the gay agenda, the LGBTQIP, Kenny letter of the alphabet guys, they also know how to lobby and to leverage. As the big agriculturalists, the guys of Syngenta, the other seeds, they know how to leverage. That's something we have been refusing to do as Christians, thinking that leveraging is somehow, it's not very straight, it's not very good. And then we are the ones who are busy going to Keshas and going for 40 days water, I'm at 21 days dry, praying for God to change things while we are in a position where we can lobby. And I think that's where the Americans have beat us to it. They're like, you know what, this guy's a daimono, but look at him, he's a very popular daimono. We actually can get this guy in and tell him these are reducible minimums. And I think that's what they did. He's doing things that they can't do, but there are certain things that they want him to do. That's why they lobbied for him. Now, we as believers also need to get that level where even if there are things that we are not ready to do, if we get somebody who's able to do it on our behalf, we shouldn't be shy to influence those people in the direction that we want. And why is that important? If you remember Joshua and the Gibeonites, those guys knew, by the way, we have no chance in hell. But they managed to get Joshua into a contract, a covenant that give them insulation against the children of Israel attacking them, even though they were among the people who are supposed to have been destroyed. And we see the righteousness of the covenant that God had with the children of Israel was such that they had to honor the deal that they had with the Gibeonites. And me, that's my thought process, man. You know what? Yeah. As guys we didn't do this, but guess what? We want to be Gibeon with you. Let's enter into a contract. You go in. When you go in, please make sure that abortion is not legal. Please make sure that 1, 2, 3. And I'm sorry, I can live with that. I honestly can. But like you said, Apple, it's a place of agreeing to disagree. Over and out.
Well, welcome aboard. You are truly David Ewagata. Great to have you. And of course, Richard Chombo is actually listening to how Gio is stuck in traffic and he's going to be joining us. And of course, the rabbi just showed up. Great to have you here, Michael. Sorry, man. I know where I got you guys a bit mixed up. I was trying to sort out everyone, and I'm glad you found your way into this room. Welcome aboard. All right, Joy, I still come back to you so that we can sort of kick off again our conversation today. There are two things that we needed you to be able to kind of just show, shedding light, help us help understand. That is a constitution, and of course, the reproductive, I think it's reproductive health bill. So I'll give you an opportunity to kind of just dig in, and then we'll pick our conversation on that.
Which one would you prioritize, BBI or the reproductive health bill?
BBI, we're still here. We'll still go to the reproductive health.
Okay. No, because the reproductive health bill has been very active this week, because we are talking to the religious leaders and the religious groups. And so we made our presentations to the committee this week. So, Aya, you still want to stick up in the
you got the two that I hope you have the time to be able to throw in light today. So just pick whatever you'd want to start with. That'll be okay.
Okay. Hold on. No, let me start where you suggested. Let me start with the BBI process.
Okay. Go ahead.
It's just as okay. So BBI. Let's start the handshake on March 9th, 2018. That threw us all off. But give birth to the handshake. Now, this is a completely personal opinion from my observation. So it's not the official line anywhere. This is the official Joy line. So my opinion was this: there was one person who had sworn himself as the people's president and was at risk of
correction, Joy. He was sworn in. He didn't swear.
So somebody saw himself in as a people's president. It was his party. He organized it. He paid for it. He saw himself in as a people's president, and was at risk of facing treason charges because his lawyers, everybody was in trouble just because, he's a bit sensitive. So arresting him was a little bit difficult at the time. But he knew that he was in some level of trouble. So immediately after that, the way to stay out of trouble is to create enough chaos to show that you're really important, that if you get arrested, things will get bad. So the chaos ensued. And then you had the president, on the other hand, who had to deliver a second term, a legacy term, and the disruption was not good for business. So the two men met and spoke like gentlemen and called a truce, which was a good part. And in my opinion, that was a divine masterstroke, because Kenya was headed down a very dangerous trajectory. So after the handshake, everybody was like, okay, fine, so handshake has happened, then what? That's where I think the drama begins, because none of them had really hadn't thought through to that level. So they had to come up with something. So there's some very good, clever clubs in ODM who quickly came up with a 9-point agenda, which made a lot of sense. Jubilee side, by the way, were absolutely clueless. So they said, oh, you know what, this is our 9-point agenda. Now, this is the Joy observation of this entire story. So you keep your observation. I'll tell you where it becomes official. So what happens is they have this agenda and they are like, okay, fine, so this is what we want to deal with. So guys are looking and they're like, you know what, that's not too bad. It's not too shabby. Okay, fine, let's do something with it. So what do? They decided, you know what, we're going to give some flesh to this 9-point agenda. And so what are we going to call it? So somebody said Building Bridges Initiative, hence BBI. That's where it came from. So we're going to build a bridge between this side, and we're going to meet somewhere in the middle. So they said form this committee. Now, you can tell the ODM side of the handshake was sort of thinking through as they were going along, but they were thinking through fairly quickly. Because they came up with experts and technocrats and they said, you know what, this is our lineup. Then comes the Jubilee side and they're like, you know what, what is it for building bridges or for bringing peace and water? So then I got these old foggies and decided, you know what, these are our guys. And they formed a team. So the team now becomes what has now become the steering committee, or used to be, because I think that term has lapsed. So now they're back right here. But they were the BBI task force, and later they became the BBI implementation steering committee. Now, I must give credit to that group, because for a group that was put together very ad hoc and sort of thrown in the deep end, given 2 joint secretaries and told, do something, they actually managed to give a very good account of themselves. So what happened, myself included, most of us were very skeptical at first that all that was going to come out of that entire BBI process was just creating positions. And so in the run-up to BBI 1, we're just like, just come and tell us who's going to be prime minister, who's going to be what. That's all we were waiting for. But when it came out, in addition to whatever suggestions that they were trying to make to the change in the executive, they actually raised some points that were actually not too shabby. When I talk about national ethos or shared prosperity or divisive elections, some of the things that they brought out are actually conversations that we need to have in Kenya. They talked about the bringing back of, how do you call it, national pride, building patriotism, things that they actually started suggesting. And I looked at it like, you know what? Not too bad, to an extent that even those who were opposed to the BBI before, you could see now are kind of warming up. They're like, okay, this isn't too bad. Let's see how we can make it work. Now, they decided that they have done a report and a report needs validation. So that report is supposed to go back to the members of the public to validate that this is what indeed they had done. Hence the BBI popularization tours. The problem with the popularization tours is that the politicians didn't bother to read the report through and were happy to organize the rallies to put it together. So people will be trying to put together memoranda, presentations and whatnot, but the politicians were just doing the rallies. So I had opportunity to sit in on some of the presentations that the committee, where people are going to take presentations. And Kenyans were coming up with some really good ideas. So you have guys of KEMSA, or you have guys of the universities, or you have church leaders, and guys would come with papers and actually make very solid representations. And then I also had occasion to go to the rallies. You go to the rallies, and it was a shambles. It was hate speech, it was rumor mongering, it was dancing to reggae, it was just a shambles. So we got to a place now let me get semi-official with the church. So I advised church on several issues, so Evangelical Alliance, and some of the other umbrella bodies. So they would have a conversation and ask me, Joy, what do you think about BBI? What do you think we should do? And one standard response that I had was, I can see a determination by the political class to push this BBI through. It started wrong. The way it started, the foundations were completely wrong. But if you've seen anything with our politicians and learned anything with our politicians, when they want something, they'll find a way to get it, and they will find the money for it, even if there's none to be found anywhere. That's when you'll know that even government has got a mattress and they stuff money under the mattress. I mean, we just donated, how much did you donate to Africa Union today? Was it 2 billion? What did Wambua announce today? So I'm like, oh, we don't have money to go to countries, but we've got money to donate to Africa. Story for another day. So I kept urging them. It doesn't matter whether you support the process or not. Think about, go through the report, think about the issues that make sense to you and make recommendations. And I'm very happy to say that many of the church groups, walichangamkia eventually and made presentations. The reason for that is simple, that if it is indeed pushed through, we'd rather have our voice in it rather than make declarations of we will mobilize our people against it and then realize, what? The train left the station and it left us behind with it. So now where we are with the BBI process is the report was finished. It was done. The technical committee did its work. Men and women put in so many hours. When I got to see the back workings of the BBI committees and the people working at it, I have a lot of respect for those guys. Coming up with something out of air. The politicians just give you something, they thrust you with it, they give you a little budget and tell you, what, go make this done. And I interacted with people who worked day and night on that document, and I have nothing but mad respect for them. But now the problem is the dynamics changed. COVID came, the country ran broke, reggae stopped. And so we are in a place where now, even if it was sort of styling itself and coming out as something that could be positive and good for this country, the dynamics on the ground now have changed. And as much as they're excellent ideas, right now I'm looking at it, I'm like, how are we even going to do a referendum without putting the lives of people at risk? Are we going to risk running an election or running campaigns in this time? Okay, the politicians are still running campaigns, so I don't even go down that path. But over and above, some of the things that were in the BBI report, in all honesty, don't even need a referendum to enforce. Some of them is just a matter of goodwill. Like, for example, we saw there's something that we've been talking about a long time with the corruption, about reversing the Ndegwa Commission recommendations that civil servants can do business with government. Since the BBI came along, we've seen KEMSA. Today, there was the scandal about the leasing of medical equipment and stuff like that. This is a no-brainer. And all it took was a commission to change that. Now we have another commission saying that should change. So there's some of those things that I think the president and the other principals just need to just pull the plug and say, you know what, this one we actually can implement. And we go ahead and implement it. But because of, I think, egos, expectations, and everything else, we are suspended in mid-air. Now, the bit about creating positions, I don't know what BBI 2 is going to say, but BBI 1 had sort of refused to go down that rabbit trail. It instead was creating room for like a conversation around it, but they had refused to create the post of a prime minister. It had refused to like redefine what we have now. So they're talking about other things other than the executive. But let's see what BBI 2 holds for us. The thing is that it is held in such, even when we're working on the document itself, we're working in silos. So you're only working on your bit. So if you're working on legislative, you just work on legislative and something. So you don't have a whole picture of what was going on, except for very few people. So for most of us, we just have to be patient to see what comes out of it. But in my opinion, it's like where I started with the lobbying issue. It's one of those things where you may not like where it started, but if you really want to get your interests across, you need to get your foot in the door. So for example, like for the church, we made very strong recommendations about removing the church from the Societies Act, not the church, all religious peoples of faith, removing us from the Societies Act and having a separate Religious Freedom Act so that we are by ourselves. Then we drafted it and we gave them the rules and tell them, you know what, this is how we want to be governed, separate and different. So whatever else comes out of BBI, if us guys get our religious freedom manenos and we move aside to one side, we will be very happy with the entire BBI process because that's something we've been lobbying for years. And like, you know, right now, you can't register new churches in Kenya. You can't register any fellowships. It's just nonsense. Since 2014, there's been a moratorium and it's still there. So that's my take on it. I've learned sometimes you kiss a few frogs, hoping that one of them will turn into a Prince Charming. And BBI is one of such frogs that maybe something good might come out of it for us. But that's where we are with the BBI. Senior Chiapo.
Yeah, great, Joy. Now, just before I let you go on that point, we obviously, a lot of stuff, a lot of dust has been raised around the BBI. And I agree, ideally it's because we have no clue, a lot of us, exactly what is contained in that. But it also looks like an effort between Raila and the president to either box out yours truly, the deputy president, and now, yes, then we got two big groups cropping up, and really going for one another's throat as a result. And you know where we are right now, they're insulting each other right publicly and so on and so forth. I don't know what your take would be, Joy, as far as that's concerned.
It's political strategy. If you think about the very first referendum that we did to try and change the constitution in 2005, when we did Orange Banana, that was the genesis of the Orange Democratic Party. That time it was ODM Kenya. They rode on that wave to form Orange Democratic Party Kenya. And then it got to a place where Kalonzo was not letting Baba have enough space in the house. So Baba akahipa na chungwa moja and formed ODM. Akacha Kalonzo na machungwa nusu. Because remember the other one was an orange and a half. So Baba akahama na chungwa moja, akaacha Kalonzo na chungwa nusu. And with that, he formed what is now one of the biggest national parties in Kenya. Now, come 2010, again, same thing happened. The clamor for multipartyism, for a new constitution, and the campaigns created a yes and a no. And what happened is 2010 came close enough to 2012 to sort of have people still on a high and a wave. So you create the us versus them. And so based on the us versus them, you sort of solidify your base and coalesce them around an idea such that you keep them engaged until when you get to the election. So it's a matter of political strategy. So in my opinion, they have been trying to create that this time around, trying to create an us versus them, us versus them. Okay, Ruto sometimes bites, sometimes he doesn't bite, because the first time he looked like he was very much against the BBI. Then the BBI report came out and was like, you know what, we've read it and there's actually nothing in it. But guys were still like, no, you're opposed to it. So I guess of necessity, you have to look like he's still opposed to it. But in my opinion, it's all about trying to create a wave. Now, that's why the fact that a referendum is in doubt becomes problematic, because the BBI was not designed to be a gentleman's conversation. It was designed to culminate in a showdown, in a contest, in a rehearsal for 2022. But COVID has complicated issues, so that might not happen. But like I said before, with all the effort that has gone in, there is some good that can be extracted from it. I wish our leaders would have enough, a big enough heart to let us extract the good in it. But when it comes to trying to create that wave, right now, it's not going to work for them, because if you insist on a referendum now, guys will be like, the counties have got no money. We're in a situation where most Kenyans are broke. You're talking about a pandemic, we should social distance and wear masks, and you want us to have a rally. How is this supposed to work? So it's going to backfire right now if you try to do the rallying people and the referendum push. So that's why right now it's looking a little bit doubtful. But I'm also thinking interests have changed, because by the time we hit next year, 2021, the dynamics will be different. So it will be now apparent that President Kenyatta is like on his very last, the last leg of his term. So his influence will not be as strong as it is now. So people will be looking at him more in the rear view mirror. You know, he's like the guy who's passing by. So at that time, people will be very much looking at how to position themselves. If by that time it is apparent that there'll be no change at the executive, I don't see Honorable Raila now getting to an arrangement where they're looking for a prime minister to do what. He'll be wanting to gun for it in his own capacity to become president on his own terms, like Uhuru has done. He'll not be looking for the compromise anymore, so it won't be so exciting. Same thing now with Ruto. By that time, he'll be looking at, you know what, I have served this guy enough. I've served the grace. I've gotten to a place where now, you know what, you can't blame me anymore for anything, and it should be full throttle. So that's what I think they wanted to use it for. So, but the referendum, because it's not going to work, I think everybody's back to the drawing board as to how to really use this BBI. But from where I sit, it's not really a Ruto cup of tea. This is the headache of the president and the former prime minister. So they have to figure it out. For Ruto, whichever way it comes, I think him was going to play the ball the way it's thrown at him. So I think he's just waiting to see what mtafanya nini, mutaweka referendum, mtaweka. So he's playing, waiting to see how the play will come at him. But for the other two, they need to figure out how they'll still use this to good effect. So kitendawili kwao.
So COVID-19 to a certain extent seems to have played well for the DP, right?
Oh yeah, that has it has saved it majorly, because those rallies were creating a real momentum, and it was troublesome. If I was sitting in his quarters, I'd be looking and I'd be thinking to myself, how do I counter this? Because it was hit after hit after hit. Then comes COVID, and everybody has to go home and sit down fast for 2 months before we can even look outside the window. In politics, that was such a long time. So it really cooled the temperatures down. Because you can see, like, even today, Baba was I think he was in Taveta, in Voi, somewhere in the coast. Even the crowd.
I saw where he was yesterday. He's all over the place now.
He said, talk about BB, and guys were like, you know what, we are hungry, we are broke, just don't tell us. The mood has changed. Whereas before, guys would have been very excited to hear what he has to say. Now, if you just say BBI, you lose the crowd. And it's very, the math has changed. So they have a headache on their hands.
All right. Well, guys, on Matthew's Coffee Bar, thank you. I can see you, lots of you logging in, and you're welcome. We invite your comments and we invite your input here. Let me just throw this wide open to the guys in the house. See whether you want to throw in any form of contribution. Jacob, your man, your man had to go silent for 2 months, like they say. That's what
the people who saw the president in.
Yeah,
I know. I know. Like I said, it was, of course, my guy was sworn in by the people. The people wanted the people's president, so they had to swear the nation wanted a president, so they swore their come. So, but, no,
there was already a president.
Yeah,
we already had a president.
I know, well, but you know that was not the president of the people. That was the computer president. But now the people's president was.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
That was the computer president, Joy. But this is the people's president. Now, jokes aside, I kind of wrote something on Facebook this week. I knew I was going to get some dots that about the DP number 2, and I said with the pace he's going, he's unstoppable. When you look, jokes aside, to be honest, if elections are called today and you put in our deputy president with anybody else, he will take these things hands down. The people are with him. I think Jacom and everything else.
Computer system.
Computer, of course, with the current system, with the deep state, of course, the computer will rig it out, of course. The computer, because the people who still did the same thing are still there, so they will do the same games. But the people will, of course, the heart of the people are with the deputy president. I would say that it is just sometimes that some of our leaders, and I heard what Gitao said, personally, I disagreed with Joy, but I didn't want to bring it on because that was not the debate. But there has to be integrity. Man, in one way or the other, there's no way out that you can be in a position today and say that you want to serve people correctly. Yes, you can serve the people, serve your stomach or your ego, but then you're not doing the correct thing that needs to be done. It's just, there's no two about that. But having said that, when you look at the BBI, to me, if you'd ask me today, my friends, I would say this: why do we need another constitution when we have not even completely done away with our current constitution? If the leaders, and I'm sorry, sometimes I'm saying the leaders, let's say if we would adhere correctly to the constitution that we have now, we have the best constitution. I'm telling you, I know there's some one or two things that still need to be changed. I'm not an expert. Joy is, I'm not an expert. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a preacher of the Bible. I'm a theologian. I'm not an expert in the constitution. But when you look at it today, if we have a willing people or leaders who are in place of authority, there are some things that could not be the way they are currently in our country. And that would be, so if you talk about the BBI thing, and I saw, today I was just reading right now the Standard, and I saw Jacom in his vehicle with the mask, with bodyguards and everybody else. But Monaichi is there, they are crying, that it's raining, there's no food, and you won't tell people about BBI. You're going in a helicopter, you're going to the hotel, you have got bodyguards, your children are being taken care of, So to me, it's completely off. And I was so moved with this BBI thing before. I even myself have a lot of interest about the BBI. I don't want to hear about BBI.
The 2 months of silence where Jay said you couldn't peep out the window seem to have also impacted you in a manner that you changed your thoughts and mind.
Now, over here, we don't talk about BBI in the United Kingdom. What we are talking about, we want to see that our people are taken care of. How do people go back to work? How can people do whatever needs to be done? Right now in the news, they were saying that we can't gather more than 6 people again in our country, here in the United Kingdom, from the house. So that means it's going to the church. But the funny thing is, they're saying at work, not a problem, but at house, you're not allowed to be 6 people. So, sorry for bringing that. We're talking about BBI. So the BBI thing, to me, is completely off. Let me cut it so that others can come in.
But I'm sure, Joe, BBI is not a new constitution, is it?
Yeah.
No, it isn't a new constitution, but it's bringing amendments to the constitution. And he raises a very pertinent point that we haven't fully implemented
Absolutely.
the 2010 constitution. There are large parts of it that are completely virgin territory. We haven't even started to implement it. But of course, there is need to change it. But the observation that also we need to make is, when we were suggesting the changes, just like when we were making the Constitution 2010, people were doing it with positions with themselves in mind. And that's what brings the complications, because even now, that's why some leaders are a bit cold towards BBI as well, because sasa ile position mtu alikuwa anaona ni kama anaweza kujisunda, haina haja tena sana. So, and that's why the process sometimes looks like it's not very genuine, I think.
Joy, can I ask you something? I'm not the moderator. Did we really need BBI? Okay, I understand about the handshake because of the button. I understand that bit. But do we really need to change the constitution?
No, like I said earlier, I think guys were just winging it. You know, they had done the handshake. People were like, oh yeah, so what did you discuss? What did you talk about? They had to come up with something. I think they kept making it up as they went along, and we ended up with the BBI. That's my firm belief, actually. Because even from the way the things were being released and uploaded, it was very, tuliongea nini, tuliongea kitu msijali, nobody else knows. Nini mliongea? Oh, a document tokezea, so we had 9 agendas. Okay, so is the agenda then what? BBI, we are gonna build the bridge. So I think the genesis was just wrong, because they made it up as they went along. So do we really need a constitution change? I don't think so. That's why I said the majority of the things in the BBI don't even need a referendum. These are things of just saying, kwanzia leo tutafanya hivi, na inakuwa. Because it was Boxing Day. It was just a gazette notice.
Okay, I want to hear Ken. Ken, you had something you wanted to throw into the mix here?
Yeah, I was listening to Jacob, and I was actually wondering whether he himself has either read the constitution or the BBI. Because most probably Baba read it by himself, and he also thought he had already read it.
Baba amesoma.
But to be very, very sincere, I'm actually glad to hear Joy at least trying to make clear what it all entails in the BBI document. For the majority of us as Kenyans, we either refuse such a thing or indulge in it based on either hatred or because it is our people or one of us who has said ABC, really engaging in the document and trying to see what is going on and whether we can be able to navigate through these political dynamics and come up with something that can actually be able to enable Kenyans to live well and without any strife and what have you. Because for me, some of the portions that I've read in the BBI, I actually realized what necessitated some of these things are issues like power sharing, whereby it shouldn't be just that the winner takes everything home. And I think that's where we normally have issues. Because at times you look at the person who has come second, and the difference in terms of the person who has won is very, very minimal. And so at times, I think that the number 2 person feels like, the way I worked my tail off just to make sure I garner enough votes. And I think for me, when I saw that power sharing part, it was like, let's give the number 2 something also, so that we don't have war in the country. Because we've had, a grotesque experience in 2007, whereby there was a lot of war and bloodshed and people died simply because of these power issues. But I am sure that if we have the right political goodwill, and we stop being, we tend to begin to trust people, then it's going to be easy for us to be able to run this country, in the right direction. But the challenge is that currently we don't trust no one at all. Even the politicians themselves, they don't trust anybody. It's all about whatever comes out. What is it in for me? What will I get when this thing comes out? And that now actually brings in the entire problem. Because if we just had the right agenda and just say, by the way, guys, the reason as to why we are bringing in this thing is because of ABCD. We don't need a BBI1 and a BBI, what have you, and things are being done in secret and what have you. No, let's just make it clear so that even if there is public participation, we need to see it. And I'm glad that Joy actually, was able to be part and parcel of those people who are talking about the church, because the church is normally silent in this particular place. Then we will be in our prayer rooms, binding, releasing, and choking people and hitting people in a corner of Salaba. And we're not even helping it without even coming in and saying, by the way, we as a church, we have read the BBI or we have read the Constitution, and this is what we feel as a church needs to be done. So actually even the pastors need to talk about these things in their own churches, not necessarily saying vote for this or vote for the other and what have you, but bringing in professionals who can be able to educate the church members and tell them the reason as why we are having BBI is 1, 2, 3. The reason as why we are refusing BBI is 2, 3, 4. And so my thing is we need to do ABCD and it's going to help us. And I think those are my contributions. I don't know what you guys think.
Let me say two things. One, I think it's presumptive to say that we've experienced the issues we are having because of the Constitution, and I don't think having two winners in that sense. This thing about everybody's a winner, number 1, number 2 to number 10 all get a prize. Ask Arsenal, it doesn't happen. There's a definite winner, there's a definite loser. All right. The problem we are having is the deceit around it, and I think that is where we began this conversation. It's the rigging. It's all those games that are played around. Because, and I tell people honestly, the one clear election we had in this country, I think in the longest time, I think in our lifetime, all of our lifetimes, it was 2002. All the other elections, we can honestly say things did not go as per the people's choice. And so the reason why the clashes and all these things happen is because of, one, the rigging of elections. Two, the other thing that I want to say to us is whether we have even if we have a constitution sent from heaven, it comes robed in oil and poured into Kenya, and you're told this is the constitution that will govern this country. Unless we deal with the issue of deceit, of backstabbing, the issues of what do we call them? Breaking of agreements. If you look at the breaking of agreements that is happening, the reason, and look from the history of our country, right from the first president, Jaramogi and Jomo, there was a breach of trust. You come to, the times of Moi and all these guys who served under him, Akina Kibaki, Akina Charles Jonjo, Akina
Saitoti,
Rao, Akina Saitoti, all those. There was a breaking of commitments. You come to this recent history now with Kibaki and Raila. The reason 2007 happened was exactly because of what is happening right now with Uhuru and Ruto. There was an agreement, guys said, let's do it this way. And then in the middle of it, you realize, hey, this pie is too sweet to share. Let me chew another bite. The guy says, listen, we agreed, you take the first bite, I take the second bite. There's nothing constitutional about it. It's a gentleman saying, guy, I have made a commitment. You brought me in, I will bring you in when the time comes. We are facing, and let me tell you guys, constitution or no constitution, BBI or no BBI, if we don't handle the issues of deceit and conniving, it might be Rao under the bus tomorrow. It might be Ruto is already under the bus. He's holding the railings. Good thing that he's a bit young. So anaweza shikilia chuma. Lakini ako chini ya basi. Ako chini ya basi.
Ako chini ya bu.
If we don't ako chini ya basi lakini ameshikilia chuma. Ajagwara lami. Anaiguza kidogo. Ikipiga mapa anaguza lami. So COVID-19 came and at least reduced the amount of travel that was happening. Na yake gwara chini basi ikapaka. So sasa anashuka kutoka huko chini pole pole. We don't know who's going to be removed from that bus next. All right? And the fear of these guys is not the reason why we are talking about BBI, having a position for the current president to continue ni kijana bado anaweza kutumika tena, is because of the fear of reprisal, of the deceit of our culture. It is nothing else. It's not because he's not old enough to resettle. It's not because he has not made enough money. He can live for the next 3 lifetimes on the money he has. Okay? He doesn't need to even farm. He doesn't need to even produce any more milk. He's rich. He doesn't need to go anywhere. He can settle and enjoy the rest of his life. He'll have presidential support in a presidential parks, security, food, guards, housing, everything will be given to him. But the fear of the deceit that has been is what we are fearing. Right now, that is why BBI is even that strong. Because now, UK is looking at Ruto and thinking, if this guy gets in and becomes president, what will become of me? I've patched my hedge enough with Rao to be able to know what to anticipate from Rao, but I don't know what to anticipate from Ruto. Why? Deceit, deceit, deceit. If we don't deal with that, it doesn't matter what we do with the constitution. It doesn't matter whether we have winner takes it all or number 1 to number 5 are all given positions. They will fight it out because now we've had number 1 and number 2 come in together. Yeah. All right? The leader and the deputy, they come in together. And even in that position of number 1 and number 2 running together as running mates, we've not been able to finish terms. So what does that say to us? Rao came in with Kibaki, 1 and 2. Did we finish 1 term? No. Ruto and Uhuru came in together. They managed 1 term. Surprisingly, they managed 1 term with a bit of mama. 2nd term, it has cracked the same deceit. And so,
but 1 term, the first term, it was the TNA and URP. Everybody still had their own house. This 1 term under 1 roof ndo imeshindikana. So hawajamaliza term moja.
So Joy, unasema watu wakifanya harusi kila mtu akae kwake.
Don't change your name. Don't change your name. So we need to deal with that. If we don't deal with that, the next election comes. Whoever wins and does not win the constitution rightly, it will still cause the same amount of friction. Take, for example, if today Rao and Ruto are to go head to head because BBI refused and they're going head to head. In fact, for me, my bigger fear is not Rao winning. I mean, it's not Rao losing, it's Ruto losing on an unfair platform. It will not be nice for this country.
Okay, guys.
Yeah. If he loses fair and square.
Yes, yeah.
If he loses fair and square, that's fine. But if he loses...
Hold on, guys. We need to get some form of direction here because I want us to give a direction to people that are watching. And they would love to know, and we've got lots of people. Actually, I have Lillian all the way from the US, asking one question. I've heard people say that BBI was making a provision for a House-elected Prime Minister, which could pave a way for Kenyatta to get 6 more years as PM. Is that right? Maybe, Joe, you can answer quickly. And I want us to kind of give a direction here because your people watching wondering, okay, fine. So, as believers, what are we supposed to do? Pray, think, vote, cast, throw stones. What are we supposed to do? That's why we are having this conversation, people. So, Joy, could you please answer Lillian quickly?
Let me start with Lillian's question because that's the easier one. What was the proposal? So the proposal was we have an election that gives us a popularly elected president. However, amongst his workers was going to be a prime minister, but the prime minister was going to be an appointee of the president from amongst members of his own party or members from a coalition that he would be a party to. And the prime minister would be serving at the pleasure of the president. So if the president wasn't happy with the conduct of the prime minister, he had the authority to actually step him down and have another prime minister elected. So it's a little bit like what we have now with Matiang'i, only that now it would be coming from the floor of the House and he would be a chief minister, so to speak. So that was the proposal that was on BBI 1, which was not, of course, what people were envisaging as they envisaged the position of a prime minister, because they're looking at it more like a more powerful position. But what was in the BBI was akin to what you guys have in the UK, where it's a serving MP ascends to prime minister position if something happens and you can't work there, you step down and come back to being a regular MP, and somebody else steps up and becomes the prime minister. So that was a suggestion in BBI 1. I imagine it was reworked in BBI 2 because that is something that guys were not very pleased about. The guys wanted a prime minister, weren't too pleased with that particular scenario where you are still at the mercy of the president and parliament, so to speak. But let me just throw a little spanner in the works. David said that the problem we have is not with the constitution, it's with the deceit. And on that score, I agree 100%. The deceit has a lot to do with the problem that we have now. But our constitution is still very problematic in terms of the leadership part. Why? It's because our politicians still have a lot of say over our money. And now I'm not even looking at the presidency, I'm looking at the National Assembly. So we switched a dictatorship by one person for dictatorship by 349 people. And these 349 people discuss where all the money in Kenya goes, where all the deals in Kenya go. They tell the counties how much money they're going to have. And so you have a situation where the 349 get elected with the smallest mandate, because a constituency is a tiny mandate, but they wield the big stick over everybody else. So a governor gets elected on a county-wide mandate, as is a senator, as is a woman rep, as is the president is a nationwide mandate. But these guys are elected on a constitutional mandate, the smallest mandate, but have the largest share, largest say in how the money in Kenya goes. So part of the reason why, if we just change the presidency, but we don't change how our National Assembly works, we are still in trouble, because those are the guys who control 85% of our budget. Now, BBI was suggesting, for example, that we raise the floor of the money to the counties from 15% to 35%. Right now, the Senate is hung up trying to split 316 billion, which is about 11%. We didn't even meet the bottom threshold because the National Assembly decided that, you know what, that's what we're going to give you. Now, we have a problem there. But as you can see, BBI doesn't address the problem there. In fact, there was a suggestion of adding more members of the National Assembly, which is not very nice to think about. So we have problems with the Constitution, but it's just not the problems that are being pointed out. So that's one of the things, like, for example, even Sisi Church na maneno ya abortion, you know, till now we are still talking about stories of abortion. We had problems with this katiba. It's just that ile kitu inafanya wafungue katiba, si ile kitu ukiuliza wa Kenya, wanaweza sema yenyewe, hapo mko na point. So that's why we have a difficulty.
Could you please switch off your TV? We are it's
he's watching Days of Our Lives.
I don't know.
Pengine madam anaangalia Days of Our Lives na nyinyi mnakatia hapa temperature.
I'm going to chat him and
His mic is off here.
No, people are watching news behind me.
Jacob just wanted to show us the big TV.
We can see it. It is well located.
Then he's screaming nation at TV, but nation.
Sorry, I know guys still have to come in, the rabbis and the rest of them guys. But jokes aside, man, I know that lady's asking her, let's just hit the nail on the head. Was the BBI created so that some other people can get the positions? When you look at it, with the way it is going, the way some of these guys, these big shots by in quotes, are saying it, you can say that they have an agenda. But is that the right thing for us to do? I would just call this thing, let's call a spade, not a big spoon. I don't think BBI is needed in Kenya now. Hii story ya kwamba ati watu wanapigana ati G1 tribe takes over. What needs to be done is the Electoral Commission need to be made straight. Why don't they fight in America? How many millions of people are in the States? Why don't they fight in Canada? How many millions of people are there? Even in the United Kingdom. Get out between me and you. When we are voting in our country, we don't even know that people are voting, do we? No. The following day, what our job?
Jacob, let me cut you short, Jacob. Have you read the BBI? You cannot say or ask whether we need it in Kenya or not. The question is, have you read it? If you've read it, then you will see that there are some things within it that can be able to help us.
No, Joy has read it. Joy has read it for us. And Joy is a lawyer.
Baba Metoma. Baba amesoma.
Baba Amesoma.
That's the problem.
Joy has
That's
read
the
it.
problem.
Yeah.
No, but I'll say this. I'll say this. I think Joy kind of just give us some very key pointers that really we need to keep in mind. Number one, I think BBI came at a very critical moment in this country. I mean, guys, we've got to celebrate that. That was the hand of God right there. I mean, just the very fact that these two guys, shook their hands. I mean, you could even sense in the atmosphere that something has shifted. I think that's something to appreciate. Of course, somewhere down the road, I think the bigger politicians and others are beginning to ride on whatever it was. Again, we thank God because COVID-19, boom, hits. And then suddenly BBI seems, then something stopped reggae. In fact, there's a comment, someone who said that COVID-19 stopped reggae because the song was Nobody Can Stop Reggae. But little did anybody expect that COVID-19 will show up. So I think there's a lot of momentum that was lost as far as this BBI thing is concerned. And I honestly don't think it's a force that it was at that point in time. But politicians being who they are, you never know what they could cook up going forward. The big issue is these guys. How should we posture in relationship to this BBI? I'm glad you are raising the issue, Ken. Are you ready? Is there a place where someone can actually see what is in this document, so that as we pray for it or see where we stand as far as it's concerned, then we know what we are talking about? Because now you're talking about BBI 2, which is a new one. I didn't know there was a BBI 2. Now I've got a news today. So is there someone can look and see what are the proposals and so on and so forth, so that as we talk about it, as we talk to our members about it, we know exactly what we're talking about. Because all we have seen is the dust that have been raised by politicians left, right, and center, and suddenly people taking opposing positions, and that's where we are. So, but then to have knowledge of what is contained in these documents, I think it's important for us to be able to. Is it available where someone can be able to read it?
This is where you find it.
Okay.
There's bbi.go.ke.
All right.
Okay.
So if you go to bbi.go.ke, you find the entire document there. There's the process that they went through, the signatures of the participants that they talked to just substantiate that they actually talked to actual Kenyans and not
Joy, our actors, Oma, tuambie tu pointers, tuambie tu.
No. Let me tell you the beauty of how the website was structured. You remember when the book came out, it was like just shy of 200 pages, and there was this thick thing that you are supposed to deal with, and it was a bit much, so to speak. But when you go to the website, they broke it down to like chapter by chapter, so you don't have to read it all at once. And even the chapters, they are sort of truncated. It's not the whole thing. So it's very easy to get a quick overview and an update of what is going on. So BBI 2 is not yet out. So what you find there is what was in BBI 1. There's a question.
Joy, my problem is, Joy, sorry for coming through. My problem is our Tumishi. What is wrong right now with the current structure of government? This issue, okay, we have a president, we have a deputy president, right? Then now we have the cabinet, secretaries, and the rest of it. The thing is, if they would change the cabinet secretaries to make them to be members of parliament, that one I agree with. Even we see it here in the United Kingdom. Number two, the thing that I hate so mostly, that I'm hearing, and this is what is getting into me, that one tribe has dominated. Now, when we get that, then we become tribal one. At one tribe has dominated the presidency, and now we're talking about our brothers or our sisters. If I'm coming from Central, so it is us now who has dominated the presidency. At the end of the day, it is competition. Others win, others lose.
I think Joy answered. I think Joy tried to answer that, Jacob, by saying that the BBI, the way it started, and even Pastor Matthew mentioned it, the way it started, it helped that political impasse that was there. And I think the idea of saying, okay, let's build onto this and try to harmonize and bring together the country was maybe the foundation of those discussions. But somehow, as it has progressed, the idea started to become, that eventually it would become, so I agree with you, Jacom, that it eventually looks like it's going to become a election sort of vehicle. So similar to the previous 20, correct me if I'm wrong, I think 2017, 2010, where there were sort of referenda leading up to sort of ODM and the structures. But very quickly, all I wanted to say is, again, I think we're surprised by, and Joy again was right, and I love to agree with Joy. Politics is pragmatic. Politics is about compromise. And I think that's what Joy has been talking about. I think the challenge with the way maybe people go about it is the compromising and the pragmatism in Kenya doesn't look, first of all, beyond the politicians themselves. So they are only looking at their own interests.
Yeah.
So they're not looking at how can I compromise with the other side so that people benefit. So you need to have things where health, education, security, those are just non-negotiable. People, as a country, people know that this is how we're doing our health system, this is how we're doing our education system, and this is how we're doing our security system. So I think the compromise that is there with politicians and their pragmatic nature, unfortunately, they don't see beyond themselves. And I think this is the challenge that I think Joy was alluding to, that even if BBI was starting from a good idea, it then is somehow subsumed by the politician's self-interest. Where can I benefit? I need a position. And therefore, I think it comes to what Mathew was asking: how do we pray about? And this is, I think, is a challenge, because the problem from where I see, I mean, Jacom and myself, we're immigrants in this country. But what I respect about here is the politics here is ideologically based. So, lawyers who was advising the government quit because the advice that he was giving the government didn't wanted to go against his advice. And he looks at it and says, well, I don't want to serve a government like that. Why? It's on principle. He says, no, I don't want to be part of that. So I think the challenge in Kenya, and maybe this is where we need to be praying, is that we can move to somewhere where there's a semblance of people know what are we fighting for. We're fighting for values. I think the problem is people fight for positions. People are scrambling for positions. We need to move away from the unfortunate position where we are in Kenya, where the politics is, if you want to become rich, become a public servant.
We just need to call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this last couple of months that have happened on us with COVID-19 has increased drastically the poverty levels in this country.
Yeah, sure.
Now, with that, everybody is trying to climb out of a jar. The length of the jar has just been increased in this last couple of months. Any politician who falls out of favor or misses his position can move from riches to rags overnight. Until we're able to resolve that by doing, like you're saying, politics is about the interest of the people. We are still in the interest of the person. And so until we move from that place, and I think this is the conversation and this is the direction we need to take. And as a church, I think our gospel needs to change a bit to be able to represent a kingdom that is equitable, a kingdom that is just, a kingdom that is based on truth. This thing of, yesterday I was struggling and then the Lord lifted me and now I am seated up there with the kings. We need to tell guys the truth about the journey we have walked. Bishop JB did not just become bishop overnight. He has walked a journey, including speakers kuibiwa hapo. Then kubebwa na upepo. So you come and you say, I want to rise to that position. You can't. But we need to be able to uplift the entire nation. What you're saying is very right. The reason why a lawyer can resign in the UK is because he knows there are measures, there are structures around him. There are safety nets. He cannot go from being the lawyer of the government to being a beggar on the street. He has a structure. And so until we have that, And then we have, and that's why they can begin to think about what are the policies that are being brought in. As we're just thinking, who is going to give us 500 more if we run around with him in 2022? Until we are satisfied enough to think the policies. And that is what the politicians in Africa do not want. They don't want thinking crowds. They want people who will eat bread and run after them. And that is why they're driving bigger and bigger cars. Why? There's something about just a big car, a big house, big splashy things that just make you feel I am not worthy to think in front of this guy. And so we are not thinking in front of these guys. The more the money they steal, the more beholden we are to them. And so we need to be able to think about how do we walk with our people to a place where, and that is, I think, the conversation we need to be having here. How do we walk with our people to a place where they can be able to say, guys, listen, we are choosing people based on principle. If the principle is breached because of a corrupt deal or because of rigging, we stand back and say, listen, as leaders, spiritual leaders in this nation, we do not stand with that decision. We do not stand with those election results. Whether it's bread or butter on our table gone or not, we are working with the truth. When that happens, then we can begin to have those conversations that Gitau you're talking about.
Okay, great. I want to bring Michael in. Just a minute, can I just, you noticed earlier on I was going on and out and we're having a blackout here. I hope we are still running on a generator. I hope it doesn't interfere with our meeting here. But I want to appreciate, of course, a good number of people that have been tuned in all along, the likes of Uyugi on YouTube, Norbert, Fanuel Mondi, Beatrice Mukolwe, Edwin Viambo. I have, of course, Josephine Oliwa following keenly. Joy, you're bringing a crowd with you here. Joshua Mwangangi, and then, of course, 1 Timothy, that Tim was saying, Joe, is there anything new they're introducing the BBA that cannot be fulfilled in the current constitution? Some of the questions, of course, have been answered in the conversations going on, but I just want to acknowledge these guys were asking them because I invited them to ask questions. One, Letitia Sauke says, power sharing as a constituent of the BBI forms an umbrella approach to the issues emanating from the constitution. Okay, great. Then on Facebook, good bunch of people. I can appreciate all of you guys. Quite a good number of you. Thank you for staying tuned. But we have a comment from one Santa Liz, Mutuku Santa Liz, actually saying, Jacob, I don't see Ruto in it. People need new blood in the city. Well, kind of something you made earlier on, Jatelo. And then happy watching and getting blessed. I was longing for this part too. Good to see you, men of God. And then, of course, there's a question that has just come from Sauke, who says, Joe, in your opinion, has the BBI momentum degenerated? And if so, would doing away with it address the gaps in the current greed of power in the government? I hope you catch the question right there. He's asking whether, of course, the momentum has degenerated. I think we're in agreement that there's definitely a great lost in terms of momentum there. And if so, would doing away with, I guess, BBI address the gaps in the current greed of power in the government? I'll leave it to you to kind of stay on that, Joy. As we get Mike to bring in your contribution, and I'll get back to Joy because we need to talk about something else. We've been on BBI of reasonably long, but let's have Mike. You showed up, Michael. Been listening in, I'm sure. As a rabbi, you've been writing notes and what's your contribution, and then maybe Ken can make that comment he wanted to make as we move forward. Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Loud and clear.
Yes. Thank you so much, and I appreciate that. In fact, it's interesting. On my screen, Gitau is above Kenneth. Okay. And Katenia Kenneth iko na maua. If you flower them, they grow into the trees that are on Gitau's background.
Okay.
I was just looking at that. I appreciate, but well, I'm not a politician. That is one gift God never gave me. But like my uncle said, or like my brother said, Mr. Dima, I am a theologian, and I'm Yes, and a Bible scholar. So my perspective always comes from a theological kaleidoscope. And I was just looking at some of these things here that I was saying. What responsibility does the church have towards the general public as far as these things are concerned? Because in my estimation, the church is the most powerful institution on the face of the earth. It is the only one that represents the church is the only one that represents the position of God. It is the only one that can pull down spiritual strongholds. The seculars can never pull down spiritual strongholds. Only the church can. Only the church can address spiritual principalities. And that's why I think the devil is so keen on making sure that he keeps the church as corrupt as the secular space. I heard one preacher saying that God never called the church to be the head of the government, and neither did he call it to be the feet of the government. He called it to be the conscience of the government. That's why for every king, God would always raise a prophet, a Nathan, who could tell David, you are the man and you have sinned. Or he allowed Hezekiah or Manasseh to be confronted by the prophet Isaiah, or Jeremiah could confront kings, or Elijah could confront Ahab. But if the church does not do that, then we are left at a space where mental mindsets cannot be changed, which I think is one of the greatest issues we are struggling with in Africa. Mental mindsets. We have mindsets, chieftain mindsets. That's what we have. We have syncretistic mindsets where we mix our cultures with Christianity and try and make it look religious. We were arguing with another brother the other day because he was saying about generational curses. And forgive me, but I don't believe so much in that, because I look at Germany, for example. Those guys killed over 6 million Jews in the Holocaust. I mean, those people, and then they were bombed to the ground in 1945. I mean, those guys were bombed until them in Japan, Nagasaki, Hiroshima. I mean, those guys were torn apart. I mean, but today, Germany is the third largest economy in the world. Japan is number 4. So if we talk about generational curses, sasa ndio wako na zile laana zingine mpaka hata kadho ungema kimwako. I mean, what is Kiondo? Mpaka Kiondo walitupiwa plus Kiondo yote.
That's so Greek right there. Okay.
But what is it that 70 years later here, Kenya, we are still struggling? And it's a mindset thing. And I think the church can help a lot in this mindset. Grassroots education, grassroots discipleship, such that by the time these politicians think they are starting to play the same game again, they find, like what my brother Ewagata has said, it's an educated population this time around. We're asking the pertinent questions. We are putting people in the right places of position and power that we can confront this thing, because like Wakata was saying, it is to the politician's advantage to keep us hungry and poor. Then he can spend 1,000 shillings to buy 20 people. But if we decide we are not going to be paid no matter what, then suddenly the game changes. And that, I think, is my own. I was reading a newspaper article that talked about the issue in Kenya is the middle class. The middle class are usually the ones who affect the political sphere the most. Even in America, if you want to win an election, in Britain, if you want to win an election, you have to win the middle class. Because we are the ones who are going to pay the taxes. The poor are not going to foot that bill. Nimeangalia, we've been borrowing 14.5 billion Kenya shillings a day for the last how many years? 3 months, since April. We were borrowing 14.5 billion Kenya shillings every single day for 3 months. It is us who are going to pay that money.
Doing what with it? Doing what with it?
4.5 billion.
4.5, yes. 4.5 billion.
4.5 daily.
Daily, every 24 hours. And it's us who are going to pay that money. So the middle class, but because we are the middle class, we are getting paid 100K, Every once in a while, we can afford to run to Dubai and come back. We've done a little shopping. We can afford to eat at Java once in a while. We don't feel the pinch of it. But trust you me, the God of the orphan and the widow is not asleep. And that's why I feel a bigger responsibility to us who are ministers of the gospel. We've been bestowed with immeasurable power, and we can do something about it. Amen.
All right.
So that's about sorry, Pastor. That's about $4 million every day.
4.5 million Kenya shillings, eh?
Yes,
Only,
that's $4 million.
Only.
It's about $4 million. Only
dollars.
per day.
Per day.
Yeah, to fight COVID.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why we're fighting COVID, man. That's why our curve is not flattened.
Rich, are you still there? Rich, have you joined us, or you're still driving, still stuck in traffic? I still have you on screen and not.
Richie wrote something on the forum. I think we've all seen it. I don't know whether he just wrote it to me or it was to all of us, but it was so interesting.
I think it's to you.
What?
I think it's to you.
The perceived dominance of two communities is a big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
You know, that's you know, I don't know. I don't see it that way myself. I could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe I live from a different planet at all. That is a problem that we have. That's the problem I have with the BBI thing, because this BBI is creating what you call a spirit of tribalism. What has gone wrong is, it is not, can I just call a spade, not a big spoon? It is not that the Kikuyus have always been in power. No. It is because they have the numbers and they have won the election. Let me call it winning. Whether it is through the computer, they have won it. Do you understand what I'm saying? So what needs to be done? What needs to be done here is those computers need to be brought to the UK and fixed properly.
How do you think that the UK can fix?
Unajua sababu kuna fumbi huko mami. Hapo Kenya inaingia na vumbi na hizo takataka zingine. They need to do it properly. Put men and women of integrity at the IEBC. Then watu waende kiwanjani wang'ang'ane. You know, whosoever wins, wins. I believe with all of my heart. Okay, I know the...
Jacob, Kiswahili nasema usitupe ambachao kwa msala upitao. You're still a kid. You know these things, whatever is happening here. But Matthew, if I may just make that statement I wanted to make before Joy comes in.
Go ahead. Quickly, Iva. Yes.
Yeah, you know, I'm a firm believer that if you want to correct a situation, you need to confront it. And as a church, we cannot continue to make church pillars and church pews our pillows, where we keep on crying and filling the altar of God with tears, and yet we are doing nothing with regard to reading. Because the problem, and you know, Jacob, the other time when I was saying we read, he had said, Joy Amesoma. And that's the culture of a majority of Kenyans. That's the culture of a majority of Kenyans. But they don't want to read. Because if you read the BBI, there's even a place for, you know, rights and responsibilities of a Kenyan citizen. What you are expected to do and what you're not expected to do. And I think it's in our Bill of Rights, the Constitution, if Joe can correct me, I think it's Article 27 and 28 right there. You'll find all those rights on what Kenyans need to do. So for right now, what the church needs to do is to bring in the likes of Joy and the Babus and what have you, and come and educate, you know, the churches. We need to, you know, open our pulpits and say, listen, guys, this is what is in the Constitution. Read it and then exercise your power as a Kenyan citizen. That's why for me, it's very difficult for a traffic police just to arrest me aimlessly, asking me for a driving license and what have you. And yet I know the law that is constituted around that area. So you can't just push me left, right, and center because I know the law because I've read it. And so the challenge of Kenyans is, as much as we might get into either our tribal cocoons or, you know, or end up bashing people and what have you, all we need to do is bring in people to help us understand. Then as a church, which is a very powerful, you know, religious front, we can now be able to exercise our responsibility as Kenyan citizens, going to the ballot with the knowledge of what is happening. But I think we just vote because we just vote because Nani alisema twende hivi. And that's not our place. let's just read either that constitution or read that BBI, then make a conscious decision with regard to what is going on. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And I guess that's why we're also having this conversation, because with people listening, people who are following us and making their comments and asking their questions, is we're trying our best try to figure out how to navigate forward. And I'm really glad that now you can log on to it's bbi.go.ke, Joy. bbi.go.ke, right? And get the information there. Yeah, get the information. Understand this BBI thing so that you don't just say babali to somewhere. You know, you read it for yourself, get to understand it, read the constitution, and get to know your rights. Now we are moving somewhere instead of just making noise and you don't understand clearly what is in whatever document that there is. Richie, I've seen you logged in. We're glad you made it through the traffic. I don't know whether you have a comment to make, because I want Joy to just be able to give us some insight into the reproductive health bill. Again, a place we want to know what's going on. And then, of course, we'll be wrapping it up, round about that conversation. Richie? Richard Chogo. Inakaa
Richie amelala.
Mtu wa Mungu pole.
Kichwa iko kwa jam.
Away go sleep from the dead. Oh, pole, man of God. It must have been a long day.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
That is taught kiasi, lakini uko sawa.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the dogs are silent.
It's been a long day. Been in a jam for like 1.5 hours. So bear with me. And so I've been listening in, and it's very interesting, some of the things that have been said. But in a nutshell, the church, as I've said earlier on, the church holds a very critical key in unlocking a lot of what's happening in this country. And it boils down to what we've talked about before. And I think I'll be now sounding like a broken clock and just a broken record, and suggesting that we need to go back to the house of God and ask ourselves, who are we churning out there? We're churning out tribalists, we're churning out corrupt people, we're churning out these government people that are doing whatever they're doing. We have a big constituency in the church that can become the third tribe, because I know Jacob has said that, tribes may not be a big issue, but, for the next 20 years or so, it's two tribes that will be determining what's happening in this country in terms of governance. And either it's a protest vote or it's a compromise vote or it's whatever, it will always be moving between Kikuyu and Kalenjin. And we need to raise a third tribe that's called the church. And this church tribe, and I mentioned several coffee bars before, that we can begin to build a critical mass that can say, hey, we have 1 million voices here or 2 million voices here that are saying we want to go in this direction, and we can show them we have signed and we want to go in this direction. Discipleship, leadership development. Discipleship, leadership development. As long as we're not doing those things intentionally, as long as we are hoping that we will preach to people and they become good, it will not work. We have to be intentional about these things. So those are my few thoughts, because time is really gone. So that I don't say things that I shouldn't say, because my mind is tired.
I hear you. And again, your sound is also quite distorted a little bit in the background, but we've heard what you say, Richie. Joy, I think time, of course, have really run out, but I wouldn't let you go until you've taught us a bit about the so-called reproductive health bill, because we really would like to know what's contained in it, what should we be looking out for, what is our responsibility here, and how should we really respond as far as it is concerned, so that we can be informed, especially the church?
Okay, let me just dive right into it. So the reproductive health bill is currently on the floor of the Senate. So it's been sponsored by Senator Susan Kihika, and that's why you also hear it being referred to as the Susan Kihika bill. Another allegation you'll hear about it is being called the abortion bill. Now let me break it down as to why we are talking about it as an abortion bill. You'll remember in the run-up to the 2010 Constitution, there are several reasons why the church said no. And one of the major reasons why we said no was because of Article 26, Sub-Article 4. So Article 26 of the Constitution gives us rights. So it gives us the right to life. And it says many things, but one of the, where it ends, Sub-Article 4, it says, abortion shall be illegal in Kenya unless if in the opinion of a trained medical health professional, the life or the health of the mother is in danger, or unless approved by any other written law. Now, the biggest reason why we were saying no was because of the unless approved by any other written law. Because as long as we don't have any other written law, then abortion remains illegal in Kenya, save for the life and the health of the mother and the healthcare professional deciding. So as it is in Kenya right now, one, the woman doesn't have a right to choose. It's a purely medical decision, and the doctor must be sufficiently convinced that the life or the health of the mother is in grave danger for him to actually make a recommendation about approving an abortion, which we also find problematic, but that's a story for another day. So what Senator Kihika's bill does is when it comes on the floor of the House, the Senate passing acts, when they pass a bill and it becomes a passed bill, it doesn't become a statute in terms of legislation, because it has to come back to the National Assembly, which is the body that is mandated to produce laws. But if it's passed at the Senate level, then the capillary action back to the National Assembly is much easier than if there's nothing. So that's why this bill is still a threat to us, even if it passes through the Senate, it doesn't really have the force of law, because it has a persuasion on the other house to try and put it in force. The other reason is because health is a devolved function, and the Senate looks at laws that affect counties. And so if it is passed and there's responsibilities in it regarding health in the counties, then the National Assembly must give it consideration and fund the recommendations therein moving forward. So that's part of the reason why there's a very strong pushback against it, and yet it is, quote unquote, merely in the Senate, because it's a strategy to start with a less threatening house, because you might be minded to dismiss it, but well, too bad the pushback is woke. Now, the content of the bill itself, there's plenty. I made a presentation to the Senate committee this week, and there's a little video on my timeline, I think. So you might want to listen to it for the full poha, because that's about 12 minutes where I was talking about it. But let me just give you snippets of what annoys us. First and foremost, the blatant abortion on demand provisions. So it talks about how the consent of the woman, the consent of the doctor, the opinion of the doctor for somebody to be able to get a safe abortion. So for the record, there's nothing like a safe abortion, because the child always ends up dead, the woman ends up damaged, and sometimes both of them end up dead. But people still want us to believe that it is safe. The other thing it also introduces is the fact that you can get training as a community health worker to be able to offer reproductive health services. This is complete and utter rubbish, because an abortion is such a delicate procedure. For you to imagine our women means so little that any community health worker can be taught how to dilate a cervix, insert an instrument, inject the fetus, suck it out, and that's supposed to be a procedure that can be offered is just nonsense. The other reason why we are objected to the bill is also because it talks about the counties and the local authorities being able to liaise with international donors to bring this training and facilitating at the county level. This is problematic because we know that the abortion lobby and the gay lobby has a lot of money. And if they come in, they'll teach your people anything and everything. And if it's not passing through the official government channels and where there's some level of scrutiny and accountability, because like it or not, if something happens and it's GOK, like remember the time when there are some books that had questionable content and the parents raised the flag and the next thing it's been pulled, it's been what? Because there's some level of accountability when it's government. But if something is happening in a small village in Homa Bay and nobody knows it except the people in Homa Bay, then there's zero accountability. So we find that that's problematic. The other thing that the bill also introduces is the concept of adolescent sexuality education and access to reproductive health services or non-judgmental reproductive health information and services. Now, why this is not good, Michael, at least we had this conversation with you before. Why this is not good is because we have to understand several. One, adolescents, by their very nature, are not people who are reliable. You cannot trust them to remember to take their contraception every day. You cannot trust them to think of it of, this is just to keep me safe. It will be like, I've got a get out of jail free card. You mean I can have sex all the time and my mother never has to find out? And invariably, they're going to end up pregnant. Why? You guys live in the UK. You know the statistics for teen pregnancies in the UK. And they have access to contraception and information and abortion on demand. In fact, I think 32% of the teen pregnancies in the UK actually end up in abortion. So clearly that's not a solution to anything, but the facts are stubborn and people don't want to look at them. But keeping this moving along, now this adolescent non-judgmental facilities, non-judgmental is just code word for without parents' involvement and without needing to revert to parents until when it's just sign here, she's going to get an abortion. Because they talk about parental consent, but for the service. So the things you do in between, see, Hoja, it only becomes a problem when your child is about to die or not die, and now that's when they want you to start giving consent. You know, like complete and utter rubbish. But in the meantime, they've cut you out. Then they talk about harmful influences. Now, for example, religion is supposed to be a harmful influence. It gets in the way. This is actually documented that they consider parents and religious instruction as part of the obstacles to accessing reproductive health. Like really, have they seen the number of children they dedicate in church? But that's beside the point. The point is, they want to be the only voice in our children's lives. Now, the Constitution says a child is under 18. The Children's Act says anybody under 18 is a child. Sexual offences says anybody under 18 is a child. When you talk about the law of contract, anybody who's under 18 cannot contract. If you're talking about driving, you cannot drive until you're 18. But for some reason, you can make life-altering, mind-blowing decisions when you're nonsense. But let me not go down that rabbit trail further. I think you get a picture of why adolescent-friendly, non-judgmental reproductive health services is complete and utter rubbish. The other thing, combine that with the abortion demand, what we need to realize is that abortion is big business. So when these guys make these recommendations, it's not because they really, really care about teen pregnancies in Kenya and they want to see it stop. No, it's because they have abortion products and services that they need to sell. Now, in the States, for example, right now, abortion rates are falling, and 2019 recorded the lowest levels yet. And it's not because of religion or anything. Women are just wising up to the idea that, you know what, abortion is really not a solution. It's an opening of many more problems. And so fewer and fewer women are looking out for abortion. Talk to many married women today and they'll tell you, many of them find alternatives to hormonal contraception. They would rather do the clock and the what, because many have also realized, you know what, my body is not agreeing with these things. So for us to imagine that it's not very safe for some of us, but it would be fine for our children, is not even funny. Then there is the other thing that is being introduced about surrogacy and assisted reproductive health services. Now, assisted reproductive health services are there even now. If you need IVF treatment, or if you need, some treatment with hormonal stimulation so that you can produce more eggs or more sperm or whatnot, you can get that even now. Problem is, they want assisted reproductive health and it needs to be made a right, such that the state can pay for it or can be made to pay for it. Now, this sounds good because some people are struggling to have children, so it makes sense that they should get all the help that they can need. But again, we learn from watching what others have done. This has been used in certain jurisdictions to force the government to pay for people of opposite sex, but genetically of the same sex, to have children. So now I'm a woman, I decided I want to be a man, then Steve, instead of being a man, he decides he wants to be a woman. We go ahead and mess ourselves up. And now we want to have more children and we can't. So he said, you know what? Yeah, we need help. And that becomes a basis for seeking the government to pay for this sort of help. It's also been a big discussion in other jurisdictions about adoptions or otherwise, because even the way it is couched, it talks about it's assisted reproduction for couples of the opposite sex who are unable to biologically have children. May the Holy Spirit just reveal that to you, because indeed there are those who are a man and a woman who will need assisted reproduction, yes, but there are those who have messed themselves, they box themselves into a corner where they cannot biologically have children. I mean, yeah, if you're both mules, yeah, you're not going to reproduce after yourself. So that becomes a problem because they want taxpayers to pay for it. So our argument is simple. IVF is currently available, which is managed under the dentist and pharmacies board. They have actually the regulations and the people who are actually able to offer the service. If you want it, pay for it, access it privately, leave us out of it. Surrogacy opens another tin of worms because there is the issue. For example, they say like once you're 21 years old, you should be able to be a surrogate. By the time you're 21, I mean, what have you seen in life? What have you gotten out of life? If it goes wrong and you lose your womb or you have a complication, what happens to you after that? If the couple disagree before 9 months are up and they decide they don't want the baby anymore, will you be stuck with the baby until then? There's the issue of we recognize life from conception. You guys make 15 embryos, you try it first time and it works. What happens with the remainder? Issues about one person siring very many children. Because when the women read the list, he's the one who's tall, light-skinned, curly hair. He got it all. And all the women just want that one. They just want 150 children, all of them living in Shamakoko. The likelihood of them marrying each is very high.
All of a sudden, you're all relatives.
Yeah, there's confidentiality. So mtajua mpaka saa ile mnaenda kuchanganya huko kwa Kamongo ndo mnajua. The Kamongo ladies, because by the way, we are brother and sister. By that time.
Too much.
So, I know I've spent a lot of churchism. So there's plenty of facts what I'm talking about. So if you can listen to the presentation, but that's part of the reason why we are saying no to this. But also another big one is that doctors who refuse to refer you, who refuse to give you an abortion and refuse to refer somebody to give you an abortion, will be cited 3 years imprisonment or 1 million shillings in fine. And then look, if a patient can refuse treatment because they're Jehovah's Witness and say they want no blood transfusion, or you're going to die, they're like, yeah, fine, let me die. Why can a doctor not say, you know what, I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to be a part of it. You go do your homework and find somebody who will. Why can that not be a thing? Because in a culture of death, it's like death at any cost. It's like when the girls go to an abortion clinic and the pregnancy is still very young and they say they're considering an abortion. They're not told, you know what, here the drugs, go home. If you still want to get through with it, swallow them. They make you swallow the first one there. Then they tell you in the next 6 hours, swallow the next one. As in they start the process, they make sure you're leaving out the clinic when your baby is already dying inside. So the culture of death is what just messes up the entire whatever. So now because you guys are people of God, innocent blood, Chris, you're making noise. They know that innocent blood cries out and is a scourge on the land. It's a scourge on the people. So we cannot allow something to happen on our watch and say nothing about it. So even spiritually, we have to speak up against it. So just snippets of, why this thing has got to go down. Oh, and just for your information, now in the National Assembly, there's actually a bill that now is just hiving off IVF and surrogacy. So it's the Assisted Reproductive Health Bill. Now this is the National Assembly, sponsored by Honorable Millie Babona. So we are not relenting and neither are they. It's like a never ending. So we keep at it. So thank you.
Wow, gentlemen, I hope you can hear what's going down. And thank you, Joy, for just throwing that light. I think we would love to get more information by checking that presentation out on your Facebook page. And maybe get more information around and about it, because the essence is to make sure that these men here that have congregations and people that they minister to know and understand exactly what's going down, so that we can make our voice heard, and even for purposes of not only information but also prayer as far as these things are concerned. Because I heard it was a very subtle bill that was just being slipped in, that we needed to really get some light shed around it, so that we could understand what it's all about. Well, with lots of people that are really appreciating. Yes, you want to say something, Michael?
Yes, I just wanted to ask Joy a quick question.
Go ahead.
Yes, Joy, some of these things legally, yes, the LGBTQI can push it, Western nations can push it, and yes, they can try and enforce it within the legal framework of our country. But culturally as a nation, just as being Africans the way we are, is that something surely that can go through, really?
Oh, sorry.
No, and I was going to ask, and yes, and I thought that, our government would be, by the people, for the people. So shouldn't they look to, because I've seen our president trying to be pulled in by CNN anchors, to try and talk about. I'm completely respectful of that. I love that. He just shuts it down. Hey, that is not something we're going to discuss, not on my watch. I always remove my hat for that man. But culturally, as a nation, do you think that, I'm just...
If you look at the strategy, the way it's been employed around the world, is this is an unpopular agenda across the globe. It's not just here that it's an unpopular agenda. So that strategy has been to use the law to force culture change. So if you make it law, then people must accept it because it is now part of the law. So you make it, any indication to the contrary becomes hate speech, or it becomes actionable. So that's why you look at, for example, in the UK, for example, right now, if you talk even on the pulpit against homosexuality outright, it's hate speech. And you are liable to even lose your license being a preacher because you are a hate preacher. It's going as far as trying to force them to actually do gay marriages. So the thing is using the law to force culture change. Now in Africa, you have said correctly, our culture is such a strong culture of life. We celebrate children. I mean, I come from a community where hata mtoto wa kuwekelewa ukiletwa kwa by the way, Steve, unajua mtoto ni wako. Utachukua tu. It's no big deal. Kulea mtoto si kitu mbaya, ni kitu by the way unajivunia. Hata kama ni wa kuwekelewa unachukua tu unasema by the way.
Kwanza kaa nafanana na wewe, mapua ni kaa yako, kuna vidole kaa zako, huwezi kana, unasema haya, it's all right.
No, me have a friend, hata si wa kukana. I had a friend who was a well-known, kajogo. He used to roam around a lot. And he's not sure that all of them were his, but you accept paternity on the basis of probability.
Balance of probabilities, 50 plus 1.
Nilipitanga huko siku ingine tukacheka ni wangu tota kikuletea unalea tu. Now that strong culture of life is very contrary to what is trying to be introduced, because where they're trying to go with their culture is to show that children are an expense, than inconvenient. I don't know if you've seen the clip by what's her name, Esther Passaris, saying watoto ni gharama kubwa. You look at her, you're like, here, okay, like sawa. Or you listen to Natembea saying your children are not bundles of joy, they are bundles of misery. And I'm like, what is wrong with this man? Because that's the conditioning, that's the thinking that they're trying to introduce. That one, children are an impediment, they are an inconvenience. So the next thing you do is to try and show women that, you know what, you don't have to suffer through pregnancy, you don't have to go through all this, there is a way out. The problem is when a woman is pregnant, and now I'm speaking from experience, pregnancy comes with it a certain level of insanity. you become irrational. There are things that you wouldn't do when you're not pregnant, but when you get pregnant, you suddenly have the courage to do them. You have the courage to say them. But also your fears are just as irrational. Things look so scary. I remember when I was pregnant, my first one, I was so happy, so excited. But there are nights I would wake up and I just tell myself, a whole human being, me, I'm going to take, and it would be, usingizi mekatika. Till morning, I'm just like, Aki, what did I just do? Am I really ready for that? So if somebody finds me in such a confused state and tells me, you know what, we can end this here now, that actually looks like a solution. It looks like a proposition. So it's using the law to force culture change. It's not that it's acceptable or it's desired. Look at a country like Ireland. It's only last year, but one that they passed a law to accept abortion. All these years, they have resisted it. So them, you can say it's the people who have changed and they've decided to accept it. But for the rest of the world, it has been the law came first and it has imposed the culture on the rest of us. And that's why we need to push back with as much as we can, because we can see where it's headed, and that's not where we want to go.
Okay. Well, guys, I've got to bring this show to an end here. There's so much, and especially we really done a lot around the BBI. But I truly do hope that for those of you that are following, sorry, I couldn't read lots of your comments and your questions. We are still here next Wednesday, same place, same time, same gang, to keep on pushing this forum. The idea is to open our hearts, sharpen our one another, of course, bring information and education to one another, and of course, help us get to know which way are we going to go and how can we be part of a solution in our nation's challenges and so on and so forth. A couple of things that I've brought up today. I really do hope that you've been able to note such. I was actually shocked when you're talking about us borrowing 4 billion every single day. Man, that is serious. That's absolutely serious. And we're gonna have to pay that somewhere. And thank you, Joe. Also, someone is really appreciating the information and education around this reproductive health bill that is being pushed. And I also want to totally say it's absolutely appreciated, because this is a forum where we get to bring these things out, talk about this, get to know what's going on, and know even as we pray and whatever action we take, it's out of being people that are informed, as opposed to just saying things because we seem to lean in a certain direction. And so I want to say again, thank you so much, guys, for your time and your contribution. Thank you, Kitao. Odima had to run away as a service or something. Thank you, David, and God bless you. Rabbi, as always, appreciate your presence and, of course, your contribution. Richie, sorry, man, you look wasted, boy. But don't worry, I'm sure you'll be fresh with a new conspiracy theory next Wednesday. Looking forward to it. Thank you again, Ken. Yeah, stuck in traffic jam. Alienda na traffic jam.
Alikuwa kwa kampeni ya Trump.
No, but Trump was for Nobel Peace Prize. Richard is
Richard alimnominate.
Anashinda Nobel. Acha mambo mingi bwana.
You guys serious? Nobel Prize.
Obama.
I'm actually going to request Samson Bonio hopefully to be on this forum next week so that he can talk for America. I've got too many British and Kenyans here. Need a bit of some American angle as well in this thing. But anyway, guys, it's been wonderful, of course, having this conversation. We totally appreciate it. Guys, really appreciate out there. I want to say at this point, thank you so much. God bless you. And we will be seeing you next Wednesday, same place, same time. Have yourselves a great time. Of course, I hope that I won't leave Joy and Richie and Guitar having a go at one another again like last Wednesday. God bless you guys. Have a good evening and see you on Wednesday.